Hey guys, I wanted to talk about our sponsor for today's episode, Dangerous Waters Comics and More. Dangerous Waters is a new online store where you can find new and back-issue comics, toys, games, D&D books, and other cool collectible items from pop culture. Because Dangerous Waters Comics is new, you have an opportunity right now to get books that are hot, like Gun Honey, Stray Dogs, and Venom, in stock right now and at great prices. This month, all orders over $40 receive free shipping. And if you use code TWISTED10 at any time, you're going to get 10% off your order total. There's no way you're going to get a better deal than that this month. Dangerous Waters is also celebrating Wonder Woman month, and all orders will come with a free Wonder Woman gift. I always prefer to give my business to the little guy, and Dangerous Waters Comics is definitely one that you should visit. Have a look around, you just might find something that you like. Dangerous Waters Comics and More, where you can live dangerously. As a spellcaster in your group, usually you have many hats to wear in your party, but because of this, sometimes you may not even realize that you're stepping on the toes of your other party members. This video is going to discuss some of the most common ways that spellcasters use their powers irresponsibly, and some of the things that you can do to avoid those pitfalls. Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I'm your innkeeper, and today we'll be talking about being a more party-friendly spellcaster. Hey guys, I have a Discord server. If you guys want to talk about D&D or other role-playing games, feel free to join. It's going to be in the video description. And I also have a Patreon. If you want to support the channel, you can do so in Patreon. I'll link that in the description, or you could just click like and subscribe. That'll help a lot as well. So the things I'm going to discuss here are not going to be hard and fast rules of never do this. It's going to be just common things that people do to step on the toes of other party members. But of course, as with everything, there's going to be exceptions to this, and there are going to be times where you're going to want to do these types of things, even though I'm saying that they're generally bad. They're not bad in all situations. So take that into consideration when you're thinking of doing any of the things that I've listed here. I'm not trying to say that if you ever do it, you're a bad spellcaster, not at all. These are just things that if you do them repeatedly, then you might be stepping on the toes of some of your party members. So the first thing I wanted to discuss today is casting control spells into a melee. This is one of the most common and biggest things that you can do to hinder your party. Control spells can be very impactful in a combat, but they can also hinder your party tremendously if you don't do them properly or you cast them in the middle of a melee. In fact, you might be hurting your party more than helping, and this is amplified the more melee combatants are in your party. So if you have 2 melee combatants or even 3, this is even more impactful against your party. So those party members that are pretty much specializing in melee combat will be sitting around twiddling their thumbs if you cast a control spell that affects everybody into a melee. So let me show you an example. Here, a party of adventurers has come upon a group of orcs. The orcs has sent in 6 bruisers against the party. They're kind of dashing towards the group, while 3 orcs sit atop a ledge of a mountain, letting arrows fly at the party. Some casters' first instinct will be to cast a control spell at the 6 orcs that are running right at you, because you think that's the most dangerous group, and can probably do the most harm to your group as a whole because there are 6 of them. So you might cast, say, web on them. Meanwhile, the orcs on the ledge are shooting arrows at your group, and your fighter and barbarian have a decision to make now. They can spend a couple of rounds trying to scale the mountain ledge to take out the archers, or they can just hold their actions until the orcs get out of the web. You have basically removed your own melee combatants out of the battle for a couple of rounds by doing this. Not only that, but the archers are basically getting free attacks on your group, and your group is going to have a much harder time dealing with them. Plus, it can lead to a very messy battlefield that causes your teammates to have to maneuver around this major inconvenience. This applies to many spells, including darkness, fog cloud, web, and so on. Avoid casting spells into a melee that apply penalties to your melee combatants. Instead, you could have cast web or darkness or fog cloud or any number of those area of effect control spells at the archers. This would allow your fighter and barbarian to take out the melee combatants, and the rest of your group can help focus fire on them from afar since the archers have been taken out of the battle. Or you could slow down the bruisers by targeting the back lines using your area of effect, but allowing the front lines to avoid being caught in it. That way you're going to split the group of bruisers into 2 waves, which makes it a lot easier for your party to handle them. So the back lines will be caught up in the web, while the front lines are going to be able to reach your fighter and barbarian, which it's going to be much easier to handle 3 of them by your fighter and barbarian than having to deal with 6 at once. And then once those backline 3 get out of the web, the other 3 are either going to be dead or very badly injured, so that's another good way to handle it. The bottom line here is that your group is going to be more appreciative of you if you're more considerate when you're casting your control spells. As a rule of thumb, I recommend casting spells like the ones that I listed above into groups of unengaged enemies, as opposed to casting spells into groups of enemies that are already engaged with your party or about to engage your party. Or you could just save your control spells for battles with large numbers of enemies, or enemies that are separated into different units, or enemies that come in waves. The second topic I want to talk about is stealing the spotlight from other party members. Sometimes it's easy to get caught up in how versatile spellcasters can be, and then you try to solve everything through magic. Keep in mind that some of your party members are more specialized, and stealing their spotlight might really ruin their experience at the game table, because that might be the one thing that they're really looking forward to doing, and if you take that away from them as a spellcaster, they may feel kind of useless in the party. So you definitely want to be careful with that type of thing. So to give you an example, let's say a ranger or rogue may be great at scouting ahead and exploring, but you can outshine them by sending out your familiar to scout ahead. Your familiar is smaller, maybe it can fly, it can squeeze through smaller spaces. It may be a better explorer of a cavern or a dungeon than the rogue or the ranger, but the rogue or the ranger do have some abilities that can help them as well, and they might be able to communicate a little bit better back to your party. So if you have an exploration specialist in your party, don't send your familiar to scout ahead. Let them shine, let them do their exploration thing. And if you wanted to involve your familiar, maybe send your familiar with them, and then whatever that they find while they're exploring, they can send the familiar back just as a messenger to relay information back to your party, and then you guys can send that familiar back and forth. That might be far better and still allow those players to shine in their exploration. The same thing goes for social interaction. If a player has taken abilities that are going to help them interact with NPCs, don't bypass them and cast command or suggestion or charm person or friends on every single NPC that you interact with. That player that is specializing in social interaction may look at you and just think that you're kind of cheating your way into a social interaction when they worked hard on their character being good at that just in general. So let them have their moment, let them shine using their skills and abilities. And you can mitigate these type of situations by taking spells that, instead of doing things better than some of your party members, maybe take a different spell that'll help enhance those characters in what they do and make them better at what they do. That way you're still helping, but you're letting them shine. So maybe take a spell like invisibility and cast it on the rogues or the rangers. Maybe get bless, and you can use that on your fighters. Mage armor for barbarians and monks, or enhanceability for social interaction specialists in your group. There are a ton of spells that can help your party be better at what they do and let them shine, while you still get the benefit of helping your group through enhancement spells. The third topic I want to talk about today is jumping into a melee and putting yourself in danger and having your allies have to go and rescue you. Oh my God, have I seen this many times, and I've done it myself many times. So it's something that you definitely want to be careful about. So just as an example, let's say you really want to land that touch spell on the big orc boss or something, and you run in and you try to touch him. So you land the hit, but then he uses legendary resistance and shakes it off, and now you're stuck because you used your action to cast a spell, and your movement, you don't have enough movement to get away. So then the orc boss on his turn is really going to bring the pain to you. Hits you, maybe crits you, takes you down in one hit because you don't have a whole lot of hit points. The fighter was on the other side of the battlefield and now has to disengage with the people that they're fighting in order to run and try and rescue you, prevent you from dying. The cleric may have been in the back lines and now they have to run and get in the middle of a melee and put themselves in danger just to try and heal you so you don't die. The entire party has been put into a position where they've had to redo all their tactics just because you put yourself in danger and in a situation where now everybody has to stop what they're doing and go and rescue you. This type of thing is the type of thing that leads to total party kills. So if this situation were to happen, you can probably bet your bottom dollar that a TPK is very likely in this situation, because now the fighter is going to have to try and rescue you and take attacks from the orc boss, the cleric as well. The other people the fighter was facing are now going to engage a weaker party member. I mean, this is a disaster waiting to happen. A lot of creatures, a lot of intelligent creatures, once they see that you're a spellcaster and they know what you can do, you will be a main target. That's why you want to make sure you keep a distance and use tactical positioning whenever you're in combat. Always use tactical positioning and always keep in mind your weakness as a spellcaster. And that weakness is that you're very easy to take down in melee, very easy to hit, and have very little things that you can do to protect yourself if you are in that situation. So this type of thing is why I emphasize range for spells so much. Every time I see a spell with a 30-foot range, heck, even 60-foot range is cutting it kind of close. Those are very short ranges that can put you in a bad situation or in a position tactically where you're going to be in danger. So if you're picking spells that have a 30-foot range, be very mindful of what that spell does. Be sure that it's a spell that's impactful enough that it's worth getting that close to a melee. Some spells are very good despite their short range. So I'm not saying don't ever take spells that have a 30-foot or shorter range. But definitely consider what the spell does, and definitely consider before you cast it what the situation is. Analyze the situation, make sure that you'll still be safe when you cast it before you do so. The fifth topic I wanted to talk about today is the vulgar displays of power. So I'm going to be brief on this one. Sure, this one is very campaign and playgroup dependent. I understand that. Some playgroups have fun and they just laugh about it and do dumb things. That's cool. If that's how you play, awesome. But this applies to a majority of other players. I think a large portion of D&D players tend to play a little bit serious. I mean, sure, you have fun, but you do have a little bit more of a serious nature to the adventures and your characters and the things that they do. Or if you're playing with strangers, then definitely follow this advice. Okay, so what am I saying? What am I talking about with the vulgar displays of power? First, don't go around charming or casting spells that manipulate people's thoughts on every single NPC that you run into. This is very, very disruptive. Trying to intimidate shopkeepers by casting a spell that looks very powerful to scare them, or polymorphing the shopkeeper and threatening not to polymorph them back unless they give you a good deal. All that kind of stuff is what I consider vulgar displays of power. But it doesn't just end there. Flying into town on a broom, or flying into town on your familiar that you've polymorphed into a gigantic dragon, that's a vulgar display of power. Those are disruptive, because if you consider a townsfolk who is not seeing dragons on a regular basis, sees this person flying in on gigantic dragon, this is probably going to be pretty bad for your group. They're going to be looked upon with suspicion, because regardless of whether you're heroes or not, a regular person sees someone with power, they're going to look upon them with suspicion. That is just the nature of humans, right? Other things that are really disruptive, walking into town with your army of undead, that kind of stuff. Keep that to a minimum. Discuss it with your group. If your group is cool with that, if that's the kind of game you play, then it's not a problem at all, and just ignore this section. But if you're playing with strangers, if you're playing in an Adventurers League game, or if you're playing in a more serious game, then this is probably advice that you're going to want to take to heart. And maybe you hadn't considered, but it's something that I think is pretty important. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about today is casting area of effect blast spells into a melee. I've seen plenty of games, I've been in games where people do this, where they're like, well, there's 20 goblins and there's too many of them. The fighter's in the middle of it, the barbarian's in the middle of it. They got plenty of hit points. The goblins don't have as many hit points. It might be better to just land one big fireball, clear out the goblins, and your fighter and barbarian will take a little bit of damage, but they got enough hit points to survive it. Very flawed logic here. You have to consider the way Dungeons and Dragons games usually go. You have more than one encounter generally. Almost never a good idea to damage your allies with spells. Almost never a good idea. You have other encounters that might happen later on in the adventuring day. Hit points are a resource that is limited in an adventuring day. And healing hit points, if you look at the healing spells, most of them are pretty subpar in terms of how much they can heal based on a spell level. I mean, when you have a 3rd level spell that heals 46 hit points, that's not that good if you're shooting a fireball and hitting your fighter and your barbarian and your paladin for a bunch of damage, for 8d6 damage. That is not going to work well. You're going to use up cleric spells unnecessarily to heal your party members. You're going to use up potions to heal your party members after you've damaged them. And if you can't do that, they're going to go into the next fight injured. And it might be a reason for them going down and having to make death saves because you injured them earlier with a major fireball. And not to mention, especially if you don't ask permission, your allies are not going to appreciate. 90% of the time, I would say most people do not like taking damage by their own teammates. It's not fun. It's not something you want to do. You don't want to be standing there doing what you do best, which is being in melee, and then all of a sudden one of your own allies shoots a fireball and burns you up. That's not fun for a lot of players. But you know what? Even asking, I think, in my opinion, don't even ask, because some players, especially, people who game, they're kind of shy and they don't want to disrupt things and they don't want to have a confrontation. So a lot of times if you ask someone, they'll tell you, yeah, go ahead and shoot that fireball into the group. But inside they're thinking, damn it, why is this guy going to do that? And they just don't want to tell you anything because they don't want to have a confrontation or they don't want to have an argument about it. So they just let you do it. But inside they're resenting you and they're upset about it. So even asking may not be the right thing. Personally, just don't do it. Just don't do it. Find other ways to damage those creatures or manage those creatures to help your allies do the thing that they do. Do not shoot damaging spells into a melee because you're going to have upset party members, and eventually some of those people may quit the group. Some of those people may then do things back to you if they're vindictive. It just leads to a bad play experience, in my opinion. So again, some groups maybe are okay with that. I think it's a very small minority of people that are okay with that type of thing. So overall, I think it's probably a good practice to avoid that. So all those are, in my opinion, some of the worst offenders in terms of casting spells irresponsibly. What about you guys? Do you have any others that you wanted to add to the list, maybe that I missed? I would love to hear about them, and go ahead and post them in the comments down there in the video description down below. And remember, as a spellcaster, you have some very impactful spells, but some of those spells can be very disruptive if you aren't mindful on the impact that they have on the rest of your group. It's all about fun, and as spellcasters, we have to let others have fun too, even though we know as spellcasters, we're probably the most powerful member of the group. And that does it for today's video on responsible spellcasting. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. For those of you guys that hate me mentioning it in the beginning and the end of the video, this one's for you. Please like and subscribe. And as always, I'm your innkeeper at the Twisted Tentacle Inn. Check in anytime. I'll talk with you then.